And when you look at this entire curve with all these spikes, can you calculate how much of a vote that accounted for Biden and how much for Trump?
Close to 600,000. I think our figures were about 570 some odd thousand that all those spikes represent over time.
For Biden?
Correct.
And how much for Trump?
I think it was a little over 3,200.
How about that?
More and more people these days are saying, I insist on promoting conspiracy theories about the elections, and this is because I am a supporter of Trump. I neither support Trump or Biden. In 2020, there were illegal postal voting in Korea, and all of the medias in Korea free-falled not to mention it. Countless Koreans protested and raised their voice, but in the end nothing was done and nothing happened. No legal conclusion has yet been drawn as to whether the US elections were rigged or not. However, many people have doubted about this choice because of the errors and suspicious circumstances that have occurred in so many regions. I will talk about what I think is right, and I will continue to talk about it. But you can make a conclusion after watching the video. It's all up to you. This hearing lasted over 3 hours. I chose the part that I thought it was important. If you have a time, watch the full video.
Many scholars, many experts always felt that mail-in ballots were very dangerous because they're very easy to forge. It leads to more defrauding. We were warned by Justice Souter, among others. We were warned by President Jimmy Carter and former Secretary of State James Baker in a report that they did on how to make elections more secure. They warned us that the one thing to do is do not go to general mail-in voting because every place it's been used, it's led to tremendous fraud. And that was reiterated, believe it or not, in an article in the New York Times in 2012, an article they have now forgotten they wrote, that explained the same thing. Now, you know how important that is to determining whether it is a valid ballot or not. There's only one time you get to do that, and that's when you separate the envelope that possesses the verifying information from the ballot. The moment you separate them, you can no longer verify. You can't go back and recount. You can't go back and check paper ballot against the machine ballot because it's a private ballot. It's an anonymous ballot. We want to keep it that way. The only thing that identifies it is that outer envelope. At that moment, when they're separated, gone forever. That's the moment at which inspections have been allowed, time immemorial, in America, Pennsylvania, all of our other 49 states. Several of the witnesses here have been doing this for 20 or 30 years. They've never heard of a situation in which a mail-in ballot was just put in without allowing a Republican, a Democrat, even third-party members to take one look at it and object to it, for the very reason that it's too prone to fraud. Think about this. In your state, Republicans were uniformly not allowed, kept out, put in chutes like they were cows to keep them away from seeing these ballots. Never happened before. Not only that, the same thing was done in Michigan, the same thing was done in Wisconsin, and on and on and on. So when you hear that testimony about not being allowed to see the ballot, you have to understand it's much more important than just that individual ballot. We have calculated, and the evidence will show, that there were 682,770 mail-in ballots that were entered into your votes in just Allegheny County and in Philadelphia that were not observed by any single Republican. Those ballots could have all been for Joe Biden. They could have all been for someone else. They could have had no identifying data. They could have been from the same person. There could have been multiples of them. There could have been no name on them. We have no idea if that's true. And it will be very hard now to kind of put them together. We could ask, and you could subpoena, all of the outer envelopes. I'll give you one other enormously puzzling statistic. You sent out, in the state of Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, 148 absentee or mail-in ballots. You received back 1.4 million approximately. However, in the count for president, you counted 2.5 million. I don't know what accounts for that 700,000 difference between the number of ballots you sent out and the number of ballots that ended up in the count. That number, 2,589,242, was on your government website until yesterday. And yesterday it was removed without explanation. I'm going to be very interested in hearing what the explanation is. And I can't imagine you could possibly certify without knowing the explanation of that, as well as the explanation to the 22,686 mail-in ballots that were returned on the day they were mailed. That's a trick. How about they were returned? How about 32,591 were returned the day after they were mailed? Another 20,000 were returned before they were mailed. Of course, I think this is a kind of a low count, and I guess the crooks in Philadelphia are disappointed in this. They only submitted 8,021 ballots from dead people, mail-in ballots for dead people. It's probably easier for dead people to submit mail-in ballots than it is to vote in person. You had about 30,000 of those. We're checking the records of the cemeteries around Philadelphia. You have 4,984 mail-in ballots that were never requested, and on and on and on and on. It's a sham. It's a disgrace to your state. And finally, I don't need to remind you of this. I think I need to remind America of this. The election for President of the United States is not run by the governor of your state. It's not run by your election commissioner. The United States Constitution makes it clear who has the responsibility for running this election. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of our Constitution doesn't say that ABC gets to call the winner or CNN. It says each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors. It's the state legislature that controls this process. It's your power. It's your responsibility. And because if this happens without consequence, if they can just enter 600,000 some odd mail-in ballots without allowing a single Republican to view it, what's to say that next time they won't do 1 million or 2 million? I know crooks really well. You give them an inch and they take a mile, and you give them a mile and they take your whole country. So now we'll proceed with the witnesses.
My name is Justin C. Kweder, Kweder. I am a resident and registered voter in the city and county of Philadelphia. I'm an attorney. I am barred here in the Commonwealth. I am a volunteer certified GOP canvass observer. I was present at the Philadelphia Convention Center during the pre-canvass, canvass processing, and counting of the ballots cast in this year's general election. I returned as a volunteer observer to watch the process every day for the next 10 days. I'd approximate I was there for about 85 hours over those 10 days. And as such, I will now focus on just 2 issues that I did personally observe. First, the Philadelphia Board of Elections processed hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots with 0 civilian oversight or observation. The mail-in ballots were handled, processed, opened, and counted in Hall F of the Convention Center. Hall F is a vast room, approximately 350 feet by 350 feet. That's about 120,000 square feet. The Board of Elections erected a fence approximately 50 feet into the hall that ran the length of the room. All observers were corralled behind the fence. More than 100 board workers processed and opened mail-in ballots on the other side of the fence. These masked workers were arranged throughout the 120,000 square feet at a distance from the observers of about 10 feet to more than 200 feet away from us. Unlike what some may have reported in the media, the vast majority, and I'd estimate at least 96% of the board workers were processing mail-in ballots 15 to 200 plus feet from us. Due to the distance of the workers from the erected fences, it was impossible for me or any observer to see what the workers were doing with any type of specificity. The observers were not able to challenge any decision or determination being made about the processing of these mail-in ballots. No civilian oversight over hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots, 0 opportunity for observers to observe, challenge, or inspect the mail-ins being opened. I find this to be an issue and to be irregular. Move on to the second point, the pink highlighted duplicate ballots, which I haven't heard about, at least not in the media. As the weeks progressed, the observers were informed that the board was going to be duplicating damaged mail-in ballots that could not be read by the scanners. I was told that there were more than 5,000 of these damaged ballots. I was also told that the actual number was unknown and could be much higher. The process for duplicating these ballots was for two workers to work as a pair. One worker reading out loud what was marked on the original damaged ballot, and the second worker using a pink highlighter to mark the choice on the duplicate ballot. The board's plan, then, was to run the pink highlighted ballots through the scanners where they would be counted as votes. The board workers did this pink highlighter duplication work over the course of a couple days until thousands of ballots were duplicated with these pink highlighters. On Thursday, November 12th, the observers were informed that the pink highlighter could not be read by the scanners. They all had to be done again. All of the duplicated mail-in ballots had to be fixed. And the Philadelphia Board of Elections' solution to this problem was to give the workers who were working alone, individually, stacks of hundreds of what amounted to blank mail-in ballots. And the workers, individually, were to fill in the correct highlighted ovals with dark pen. No observation. They were marking thousands of blank mail-in ballots. The workers did this double recreation work for hours before the observers realized what was going on, because we weren't told what was going on. Only when the observers confronted the deputy commissioner about this irregularity was a system set up where the workers would show the observers each double recreated mail-in ballot by flashing it at them for a second from a distance of 6 to 20 feet away, for as good as that was. Thousands of mail-in ballots were ultimately counted in this way. Again, I find this to be an issue and to be irregular. As Senator Mastriano recently said, elections are a fundamental principle of our democracy. Unfortunately, Pennsylvanians have lost faith in the electoral system, end quote. And let me add a quote that Philadelphia City Commissioner of Elections Al Schmidt just made when he said about these recent elections in Philadelphia that these were the most secure and transparent elections in Philadelphia's history, end quote. Now, I wasn't around for every election in Philadelphia's history, but I can tell you as an eyewitness, for 10 days, for more than 80 hours, what I saw was not a secure and transparent election. There are major concerns about the legitimacy of hundreds of thousands of ballots that were counted in Philadelphia. Excuse me. All right. Let me finish with this. May I suggest to you that any restoration of faith on the part of Pennsylvanians in our electoral system can and will only be accomplished after an investigation into this election, only after the law is properly applied to this election. The idea that we can just move on by making sure that the law is properly applied in the next election is, in my opinion, unacceptable.
Excuse me, my name is Leah Hoops. I'm from Delaware County, Pennsylvania. I was a poll watcher on the day of election, and I was also present at the counting center in Chester, Pennsylvania. I feel as an American that it is my duty to help protect the integrity of our elections, not just for me, but for every American. There are many who have lost life and limb for my right to vote. The counting center was on the first floor, in which there were multiple places to bring in ballots in and out of, elevators and many rooms in which workers had access. I was there for 3 straight days. What became of concern was the back room, which had no observers, no line of sight or transparency into the process. There was no cooperation, complete resistance from election night and every day after. It took until our lawyer got an injunction to get into that back room in which pre-canvassing was transpiring. Even with an injunction, which was a joke, we were granted 5 minutes every 2 hours, and the setup was sitting in a chair 20 feet from any physical ballot. I truly wish I had enough time today to recreate what I witnessed and felt during those moments, but we did not gather here today just for me and my experience, but rather a collection of experiences from Americans like myself. What I hope to achieve is for the public to understand is that we have stuck our necks out, have been intimidated, threatened, bullied, have spent countless hours away from our families, friends, and jobs. We have signed affidavits under penalty of perjury, which should be consideration enough to know that this is a very serious issue. I'm here for one thing only, and that is to speak the truth. This is not about party. This is about my country. Every American deserves transparency, truth, and be able to question those in power without fear of intimidation, bullying, or backlash. I hope this committee takes action if needed, and justice will be swift to anyone involved in fraudulent activity. The Republic is angry, disgruntled, tired, beaten up, and ready to defend this country.
My name is Gregory Stenstrom. I'm from Delaware County. I'm a father. a family man. I was a former commanding officer and executive officer in the Navy. I'm a veteran of foreign wars. I'm a CEO of my own private company. I'm a data scientist. I'm a forensic computer scientist. I'm an expert in security and fraud. So for the first part of the day, I was a poll watcher in the city of Chester. And I was with just another former U.S. Marine officer. And the two of us were the only GOP poll watchers in the city of Chester, which is about 40,000 people. Because of the consolidation for COVID, there were 7 polls that we were allowed to, that we were able to make it to in 22 precincts. What we saw out there was pretty orderly and exciting. People were excited to vote. One of the things we saw out in the field was that people, quite a few people had done mail-in ballots. So they came in and they hadn't been updated in the Delaware County database yet. So they would come in and say, the database is not showing me on the database, I'd like to vote. So the process, one of the processes was to give them a provisional ballot. And then they would vote provisionally, and then later on their vote would be sorted out. That didn't happen. I observed, and the gentleman that was with me observed 7 different polls where the people were given a regular ballot. So they cast a vote and put it in. We let it happen a few times. We didn't jump all over them. It happened a couple of times. We went up. In all cases, the election judges were very forthcoming, very polite. They apologized and they said they couldn't do it. But that somewhat spurred me to go down to the counting center, which Leah described. It's on the Seaport Ave. It's a remote building, not much around it. And I wanted to take a look. All day long, I had been told that there were 10 to 20 GOP poll watchers down there, and that everything was well in hand. And out of curiosity, I decided to go down. I arrived at 6 o'clock with 4 other gentlemen, again, former military and some good citizens from Delaware County. And we weren't allowed to get in until 11 o'clock at night, and we had to get some legal help to get us in. So it took us 5 hours to get upstairs. After that, what we saw here is, what I saw is I really think the crux of this in Delaware County is, as an expert in this, I think it's impossible to verify the validity of about 100,000 to 120,000 votes. Now, Delaware County's got 425,000 registered voters. Approximately 300,000 of them voted. I don't know what the exact number ended up. Mayor Giuliani had nailed that number. But of that number, over 100,000 are in question in my mind. What I saw as a forensics expert was an election process that was forensically destructive in the manner it was conducted, with the envelopes being separated from the ballots and gone to the other side of the room. And the problem with that from being forensically destructive is that when you go to do a recount, okay, the machines did a pretty good job of recounting, so if I have 120,000 ballots, mail-in ballots at one side of the room and envelopes at the other side of the room, it's still going to come out 102,000 votes for Vice President Biden and 18,000 votes for President Trump. I don't care how many times you recount those votes, the ballot's going to come out the same every time. So the notion of a recount in a forensically destructive process doesn't work very well. What we saw there, what I saw there, was a chain of custody in all cases that was broken. It was broken for the mail-in ballots, the Dropbox ballots, the Election Day USB V-card flash drives. In all cases, the chain of custody and the procedures that were defined by the Delaware County Board of Elections and Election Process Review they didn't follow one. I couldn't even redline this multi-page document because the entire document would be, they didn't follow any of the procedures. So I personally observed USB V-cards being uploaded to the voting machines by the voting machine warehouse supervisor on multiple occasions. I saw this personally. I brought it to the attention of the deputy sheriff who was there stationed, who was a senior law enforcement officer, and I brought it to the attention of the clerk of elections. I brought it to their attention. I objected, and I said, this person is not being observed. He's not part of the process that I can see, and he's walking in with baggies, which we have pictures of, and it was submitted in our affidavits, and he was sticking these USBs into the machines. So I personally witnessed that happen 24 times, over 24 times. We have multiple other witnesses that saw it, including Democrat poll watchers. And we were told, I was told the next day by the solicitors, well, actually not the solicitor, but the attorney that we had secured, that they said every election they leave a couple of USBs in the voting machines and they're brought back, and generally the warehouse manager comes over and puts them in. So in talking to the U.S. Attorney General McSwain and other law enforcement officers, I found out that was not the case, that generally, more than two is unusual. So they denied they did it, but as of today, 47 USBV cards are missing, and they're nowhere to be found. So I was told personally that these 24 to 30 cards that were uploaded weren't there. Those cards, I demanded that they didn't update the vote live time. They only updated it about once every 2 or 3 hours. I demanded they updated the vote so I could see what the result was, and it was 50,000 votes. And I think as a computer scientist, an American, and a patriot, it doesn't matter who those 50,000 votes were. I'll tell you they were for Vice President Biden. But what was shocking to me as an American, as someone who has gone to sea, gone to war, that that could even happen. So several other things that came up was on Thursday, it took us 3 days for them to obey the court order that I secured with Leah's help and the help of the Thomas More Society, who we thank, incredibly good patriots. They got us in there. They got the order for us to get in and watch it, look at the back offices, which were locked, for 5 minutes every 2 hours. I went in. I was the first one allowed to go in at 1:30 on Thursday, and then again at 3:30 for 5 minutes. The county solicitor had a stopwatch. On the first time, I was not allowed to touch anything. The second time, I did. What I observed in the locked room in the back office was 70,000 unopened mail-in ballots. They were in boxes of 500, stacked in neatly. The gentleman that came in with me was a Democrat poll watcher, is a forensic pathologist, a very detailed, very dedicated man, and he took meticulous notes as well. And I verified with him, are you seeing what I'm seeing? We both agreed as GOP poll watchers and a Democrat poll watcher that we had witnessed 60 to 70,000. We had a little bit of a disagreement there. The problem with that was by that time, the mail-in ballots had already been counted. So 120,000 mail-in ballots had already been counted, posted, and done. So my question is, where did the 70,000 ballots go? And nobody knows. We have a picture in here of a large number of boxes that I took that were filled with what appeared to be ballots, sitting by the Blue Crest machine. They were there for about 3 hours, and then they disappeared. I found it notable when I watched it, the first when they were taking the ballots up and down. I said, I am an expert in fraud. I saw the ballots going up multiple elevators and racks, and I think a lot of well-meaning people and a lot of honest people were there doing that. They were trying to participate in the process, and I would say that 99% of the people there, the way the process was designed, I believe that people thought it was a non-fraudulent process. I heard that said many times. I was, I said, there's no fraud going on here. I said, well, I'm not, I didn't even bring that up. But I think people saw what they wanted to see, and they saw what was intended for them to see. I called it at one point kabuki theater. I said it was all designed for us to see it. It was entertaining. There were cameras on it. When we finally got into the back room where the votes were being ingested, as a data scientist, I want to see where the data is coming in. And I wanted to know the universe of the votes. Well, the universe of the votes was only supposed to be 120,000 mail-in ballots. We were told there were 6,000 ballots remaining. So I said, okay, we have a universe of 126,000 votes. And then when I get back there, the universe wasn't 126,000 votes. The universe was 200,000 votes. So that's a problem. I think the last thing I wanted, a couple of other things, is the Blue Crest sorter machine was only manned by one person. People ask me all the time, how do people commit crimes? I know there's a lot of theories here, and I always look for the simplest thing. People that stuff, sticking USB sticks in, putting ballots in, very simple thing, only takes a couple of people. Doesn't take a big conspiracy. I think people look at things and they use inflammatory words and, like fraud and so forth. As a forensic computer scientist, my interest is in the data. Where did it go? Where did the spoilage go? How did the data come in and go out of the system? So I think as a scientist, we need to look at that, we need to audit that. What was really upsetting to me, and the most upsetting, was I had spoke to multiple law enforcement agencies and literally begged multiple law enforcement agencies to say, go in, and they said, in order to prove, prove that nothing's happening, and either exonerate yourselves from the process or refute what I'm saying, please. It's a very simple process. Just go get the forensic evidence from the computers. It's a simple process. You turn the computer off. It's non-destructive. Takes moments, maybe half an hour, 20 minutes to do it properly and collect the evidence. You open the computer up. You take a device called a bit blocker. You put it in the hard drive. It's done under the observation of law enforcement officers. They take a forensic image of the drive, put it all back together. It wouldn't have taken more than an hour to image all 5 machines. That was never done, despite my objections, and that was 3 weeks ago. Lastly, when they said, well, we've got all the forensic records and so forth, we just learned 2 days ago that virtually all chain of custody logs, records, yellow sheets, everything was gone. All forensic evidence, all custody sheets in Delaware County are gone. They had a signing party where they sat down, and poll workers were invited back to recreate those logs, and our understanding as of today was that they were unsuccessful in getting them all. So we have a situation where we have 100,000 ballots to 120,000 ballots, both mail-in and USB, that are in question. Now, there's no cure for this. There's no remedy for this. As a home charter, we could have a re-election in Delaware County for our own representatives within our own town, but there is no cure for that for the President of the United States. And I don't believe, as a citizen and an observer to this, that anybody could certify that vote in any good conscience. And if the Democrats that have a part of this process, had done things, followed their own procedures, which they created almost unilaterally, we would be in a situation where they could exonerate themselves and they could say, Mr. Stenstrom, you've been misinformed. We have evidence here that refutes what you say. But that's not the case. They can't do that. So I say, if you can't certify that vote, and you can't certify 100,000 votes out of 300,000, then you can't certify Delaware County. And I'm done, and thank you for your time and patience.
My name is Phil Waldron. I'm a retired Army colonel, 30 years. Spent the first half of my career, just like Colonel Mastriano here, as a cavalry officer conducting armed reconnaissance, counter-reconnaissance. Last half of my career spent in information warfare. So I spent all of my time as an operations officer. My perspective looking at this problem set is how to break in, how to break it, how to destroy it, how to manipulate it. And my team has been researching this specific issue since August, but we're working with another team that's been intently working on this problem set, the voting machine manipulation, for 2 years, since the Ted Cruz and Beto race in Texas in 2018 and the Kentucky governor's race, where there were significant anomalies observed. The voting systems in the U.S. And in Pennsylvania were built to be manipulated. They've been used in elections around the world and stolen elections around the world in Venezuela, Italy, Argentina, Singapore, Bolivia as close as 2 weeks ago. The Philadelphia uses ES&S, Pittsburgh uses Dominion, other counties in Pennsylvania use Dominion and other systems. So what's the real deal? So all of these election systems have a common DNA. SGO Smartmatic sold Sequoia voting systems to Dominion in 2010. And then the Diebold company spun off Premier Election Systems to Dominion as a result of an antitrust suit. So the bottom line is that these systems have similar code and similar functions. So these systems are not what you've been told. They are connected to the internet and servers outside of the U.S. They're connected from top to the bottom in the middle. There is no transparency, as our previous witnesses mentioned, as to how the voter information is processed, how and where it's stored. The voting record is able to be modified and or deleted by operators, administrators, and outside threats. Operators can assign votes for write-in ballots, blank ballots, or error ballots in large numbers so that they can be directed toward one candidate or another at the operator's or supervisor's discretion. And many experts have published how easily these machines can be hacked to manipulate votes. As a matter of fact, one of our white hat hackers previously discovered a malware that's present on the servers that captures every login and every password of every operator down to the precinct level that logs into one of these systems. That's just like giving the password to your bank account out, putting it on the dark web. It's not going to be there very long. And just so you probably are all aware, on 30 September, an election storage facility was robbed in your state. 30 USB devices were stolen and a laptop. Those USB devices more than likely had encryption devices. And you just heard another previous witness talk about the non-standard use of the USB storage devices. So these systems, in a nutshell, allow authorized and unauthorized users to cancel votes, shift votes, preload votes, vote blank ballots, all in real time and in large numbers. They're connected from the top to the bottom. So one bad actor or a team of bad actors can have equally negative inputs. It's been described by another person in another state that we're working with, just like the lotto. Whoever organizes the lotto is always going to win. It's controlling the numbers and it's controlling the margins. Our experts and other academics believe that up to 1.2 million Pennsylvania votes could have been altered or fraudulent. This is what we discovered in the last 22 days. Really, only a detailed forensic analysis of the actual machines and software will truly show how many Pennsylvania citizens have had their civil rights violated. So to use these type of machines with little or no audit trails, little or no transparency of how the votes are processed, where they go, where they're stored, will never leave the public satisfied that we truly have a representative democracy. I want to share with you one chart. I believe it's in your package. So what our team has done is focused on the spike anomalies. And these are events where a numerical amount of votes are processed in a time period that's not feasible or mechanically possible under normal circumstances. I believe Greg Stenstrom mentioned earlier the processing of these ballots through machines. There's a manufacturer-specified rate of speed that a number of ballots can be imaged and processed. These spike anomalies in this chart really show where for us to look forensically to actually determine what happened with these votes. Our team has looked at these systems, and there are a dozen ways to interdict the voting process in these issues, whether it's mail-in ballot manipulations. They can scan and allocate votes, blank votes, whether it was 70,000 votes left in the back room. There's just lots of ways to interdict these systems.
When we look at this Pennsylvania fixing the vote chart that they all have, could you explain at the very beginning what that line means, Biden injection?
So at the very beginning of the chart where there's a circle, it says on election day, what that indicates is there is a spike in loaded votes, 337,000 plus or minus of some votes that were added in there in one big batch. So that was an anomaly in the reporting. Normally you would expect to see a smooth curve going up, not any big spikes. That's kind of what Greg was talking about, the anomalies of loading and uploading those votes. So that big spike that occurs there is a prime indicator of fraudulent voting.
And that's 604,000 votes in 90 minutes, is that right?
Correct. This is 337 votes, 337,000 votes in that
period of time.
Yes.
And when you look at this entire curve with all these spikes, can you calculate how much of a vote that accounted for Biden and how much for Trump?
Close to 600,000. I think our figures were about 570 some odd thousand that all those spikes represented over time.
For Biden?
Correct.
And how much for Trump?
I think it was a little over 3,200.
How about that?
Mail-in ballots counted without being observed. Those are the ballots we were talking about that were not observed in Allegheny County and in Philadelphia.
Correct.
Is that right? 682,770. Now, this is the part that is a mystery. Mailed ballots sent out 1,823,148. But when you go to the count of the final count of the vote, there are 2,589,242 mail-in ballots. What happened? How do you account for the 700,000 mail-in ballots that appeared from nowhere?
So our cyber team uses white hat hacking techniques. They gather a lot of publicly available information, and that information was from the Secretary of State's website. That website has been updated as late as 11/16 this morning with provisional and mail-in ballots, so those numbers are still changing. They changed last night, so it's a continual target.
This is 22 days after the election.
That number, the 2.5 million number is no longer on the website.
Just been taken off?
It's not there anymore.
Is there any explanation for why it's been taken off?
There's no annotations.
But has there been a change made in the 2,589,242 mail-in votes that have been counted in the total vote?
I'd have to check the Secretary of State's website as of.
And could you also
after
check and see,
11/16.
is there any change in the 1,823,148 ballots that were sent out?
The mailed-out ballots number seems to be holding steady.
And was there any other method of producing ballots other than sending them out?
Not that we're aware of, unless as previous witnesses have testified that the potential for multiple ballot counts. So ballots could have
And
been
have you ever
counted
gotten a
twice.
chance to examine any of these ballots?
No, that would be part of the forensic process. One suggestion, whoever does the analysis is using paper and ink analysis with a microphoto spectrometer that would analyze the ink on those ballots to see if they were mass-produced.
So in addition to the 682,770 ballots that were entered without a single inspection of any kind, there also appear to be something like 700,000 ballots, mail-in ballots, that were never sent out, that were counted.
There are noted discrepancies in the
That's a
Secretary of State's
pretty big
report.
discrepancy.
Good afternoon. I'm Dave Shostokis. I'm an attorney, licensed to practice law in Illinois and Florida. And at the time when we arrived, we were herded into what's best known as the corral. I'm sure you've kind of seen or heard about those things. It was a fenced-in area that was the fence was maybe 2.5, 3 feet high. Closest anybody could get make any observations was maybe 15, 20 feet from the closest ballot processor to the maybe 150 feet, because we were in about a 20,000 square foot area where the biggest room was taking place. Biggest activity was taking place. But I would mention that the mail-in ballots were coming into that room already sliced open at the top. We have no idea when or where the slicing took place, where the opening took place, or what was in fact inside those ballots, inside those mail-in envelopes. At that point in time, folks were then separating the mail-in ballot from the secrecy envelope. You could see that, that's exactly what they're doing. They put one on the side and one on the other side. And then they take them and put them someplace, and I have no idea. And then the secrecy envelopes would go to another slicing machine, and that'd be sliced open. And at that point, then the ballots would come back, and they'd be divided from the secrecy envelopes. We had really no concept of what was going on. In the room next door, there was a smaller room around the corner that you had to leave the 20,000 square foot room. There was one about 7,500 square feet, and in that room there was a machine. And the machine would be apparently sorting things by the barcodes, and then eventually, somehow or other, people would come in with big armloads of ballots from the other room. Apparently with no provenance, no explanation of where they came from. And here's an interesting thing that you guys might consider when you're doing this in the future. One of the biggest bottlenecks would take place at this point in time, because all these ballots came in folded, tri-folded, right? And all the ballots had to be flattened. And so they would take the ballots and put them under big stacks of reams and reams of paper to flatten them out, and then there'd be workers kneading the ballots to try and make them so that they could go through the machines. And when everybody's saying, well, you haven't counted anything for X number of hours, and they say, well, we're trying to flatten the ballots. Yeah, no, it was absurd and obscene. So at any rate, that was and when everybody was waiting. That's what was going on. They're flattening the ballots for most part. And then there was about 6 machines where they were feeding the ballots. And while they had 6 machines feeding the ballots, as they would go in, 2 or 3 would kick out to a different tray than the other tray. And workers sometimes would take the ones that weren't kicked out and put them in a stack, and then sometimes you'd run all of them through again, and sometimes run 2 or 3. We never had any idea if they were zeroing out a machine, what they were doing. I asked the solicitor, the county solicitor who was there. I said, "What's going on?" He told me that this was a Pitney Bowes representative working there that had been sworn in as a county representative, and that sometimes the ballot machine doesn't count those things, and then so he runs them through. But there was absolutely no provenance to what was going on in the counting machines. I have no idea, because of course they would just take stacks of ballots that had been sitting under reams of paper trying to be flattened and then run them through the machine. So we have no idea about that. And so at one point I asked the county solicitor, I said, "Can you describe for me the journey of a ballot from the time it hits the door to the time that it's counted? Where does it go? What's the process, et cetera?" I had a short answer: no. I then asked him, I said, "Can you give me any written protocol about what is supposed to happen? It hits the door, then it goes to a machine theoretically sorted by barcodes, from what I understood from someone else, so that if there's a challenge in advance of the election, they know where to look, because of course at 5 p.m. on the Friday before elections, you can challenge things for people having died and a few other reasons." And but then I asked, I said, "Is there any written protocol for that?" And he said, "No, we have no written protocol for what we're conducting, what we're doing here." So he answered, he's supposed to be the one giving legal advice to people on how to legally handle ballots. And he tells me that he doesn't know how they're handled, and he tells me that there is no written protocol on how they are supposed to be handled. So I might suggest that there was just literally no way to change. I mean, there was no way to challenge. There was no way to look at those ballots. And I would say, in my experience, electoral experience, one of the things that legitimizes elections is the ability of not a disinterested third party to review what the process is, but actually an adversarial third party to review what the process is. And this was completely and utterly absent. I had about 25 other affidavits from other folks that had joined me during the time that had been part of this that describe essentially the same thing over there in Allegheny County. Most of whom were attorneys and had been versed on the comings and goings of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which I might suggest ultimately the last decision in re canvassing, when the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ultimately said that it doesn't matter how far you're away from the ballots because you don't have the right to challenge anything anyway. I read the opinion and I said to myself, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court just called off elections in the state of Pennsylvania. And I would suggest that the remedy for what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court does lies with the distinguished legislators that are before me. But the fact is if there is no opportunity for anybody to look at them, and the court has the temerity to say, it doesn't matter if you come in or not, it doesn't matter how far you are, because even if you're there, you don't have the right to do anything.
Sure. My name is Elizabeth Priate-Havey. I am an attorney and a resident of Montgomery County and the chair of the Montgomery County Republican Committee. We were provided our first opportunity to view and learn about the canvassing site on Sunday, November 1st, just 2 days prior to the election. At that visit, the chief operating officer of the county showed us the room where the canvass was to take place. To our shock, we were told we could not directly check the mail-in ballots. After some significant pushback by me, the county agreed to allow 2 watchers inside the room, but they were never able to see the ballots up close. Again, there was no meaningful observation of the ballots and absolutely no check of the ballots by anyone other than the county staff, which is all run by the Democrats, as to whether or not these ballots met election code criteria. At the most basic level, we were not even able to check to see if a voter voted twice or if a voter was deceased. And with the removal of the signature being a check for existing voters, there was no way to protect against someone fraudulently voting for a registered voter. In addition to having no meaningful observation or review of over 200,000 mail-in ballots, we were not provided with the change in rules by the county to allow the curing of mail-in ballots in a timely manner. Since the election, we have received many calls and emails from Republicans with questions about whether their mail-in ballot was counted, expressing concerns that they didn't request a mail-in ballot but received one anyway, that they were made to vote provisional when they shouldn't have, that they have great concerns about the efficacy of this election. There is a real disenfranchisement of voters across Montgomery County. Many people feel that their vote did not count. Because we lack the information we need to tell them otherwise, and because we were not able to have any meaningful check on mail-in ballots, we cannot provide these concerned voters with the assurance they need that the process was fair and that the election was honest. In addition to the lack of transparency we experienced in Montgomery County, the Kathy Barnett for Congress campaign found, with just the minimal information that we've been able to obtain, that at least 188 deceased people in Montgomery County voted in 2020.
Hello, thank you for having me here today. My name is Julia Vahey, and I'm a resident of Montgomery County and the executive director of the Montgomery County Republican Committee. On Sunday, November 1st, during a walkthrough of the mail-in ballot facility, we learned that no watchers were permitted to inspect or even see the outside envelope of the ballot. After some significant pushback by our chairman, Liz Havey, the county agreed to allow 2 watchers inside the room, of which I was one. As an observer at the canvass, I was corralled into a small, narrow holding area, which is blocked off by tables and plexiglass barriers in the corner of the room. Due to the room layout and location of the holding area within the room, I only had visibility to the space where ballots were flattened and scanned. This was a huge area, and the closest scanner was roughly 6 feet away and the farthest approximately 25 yards away. From my position within the holding area, I had no visibility or access to the room where ballots were sorted, outside envelopes were inspected, and both outside and secrecy envelopes were open. This space was divided from the scanning room by a large white wall, blocking all visibility to the slicing machines, the blue crest sorter, and the ballot storage room. In my opinion, this was a totally separate room and not one room, as the county election board argued. During our walkthrough of the campus facility on Sunday, November 1st, we argued that this was a separate room and was told by the county chief operating officer that we would be able to view this space by the security camera footage. The footage from these cameras was streamed to televisions in a conference room on the other end of the building, which was approximately a 4-minute walk away from where the ballot canvas room was. The system was not set up on our walkthrough day, and it was not until I arrived back at the facility at 7 a.m. on election day that I could see the footage was extremely poor quality, and you could only see pixelated images of workers moving around the room and had no meaningful visibility of the ballots. Over the last 10 months in my role, I have spoken to thousands of voters firsthand who have lost faith in the election processes and procedures in Montgomery County and across Pennsylvania as a whole. Today, I still lack the information needed to properly inform voters that their vote was in fact counted.
My name is Barbara Salika. I went to the voting polls on November the 3rd to vote in person. I waited 2 hours in line, and when I went in, I showed identification, and I was taken up to the polling place. The polling man showed me what to do, turned it on, and said, "Go ahead." I voted, and I printed it out, and when I got it and I looked at it, Trump was not on there. I voted for Trump and it wasn't there. My daughter, I called her over and I said to her, "Look, his vote is gone. I voted for him." So I called a poster over and he said, "It's not supposed to be seen. It's for privacy. Just put it through the scanner and you're done." It bothered me. It's been bothering me since, because I voted. And was it counted or was it flipped? I don't know.
And I'm speaking on my mom's behalf also as a witness. My name is Cheryl Nudo. I was there that day. I drove her to the polls. When she got done voting, she showed me the printout and she was saying how the president's name that she voted for was not printed out when all the other delegates that she had voted for were on the printout. Me not knowing, because I had not voted yet, how the printout was supposed to look, we went to the pollster that was there and asked him why the president and vice president's name did not print out when all the other names of the candidates printed out that my mother had voted for. It seemed very strange, but not knowing any better, we asked, well, what is the next step? And he said, oh, I'm sorry, he said that it did not print out because that's for voters' privacy, that none of them vote, but none of them print out. So we asked him what the next step was, and he said to put it through the scanner. So that's what we did, and we left, and it seemed very odd. Then I went to where I live in Drums, Pennsylvania, which is about 10 miles south of where my mother voted. And I voted, no problem. Everything printed out just as, it should. And I scanned it through. So it just seemed very odd. And we wanted to report that in my mother's area, which was Fairview Township, it seemed very odd that it did not print out.
This is Gloria Lee Snover. I am chairman of the Northampton County Republican Committee. Northampton County is a Democrat county where Republicans win elections. I have been involved in the political process in Northampton County for more than 25 years. I fielded scores of calls from Northampton County voters and collected incident reports from voters and poll watchers regarding the November 3rd election. The typical calls I would field were, I didn't ask for a mail-in ballot. Why am I on the mail-in ballot list? I did not get my ballot. What should I do? It's been weeks. How come my wife got her ballot and I didn't get one? We applied on the same day. How can I vote on the machines if I applied for a ballot? Is it safe to put my ballot in the mail? My ballot says it wasn't received, and I turned it into the election office in person. My ballot says canceled. What does that mean? I voted in person, and it still says not counted. I've been on hold with the election office 70 minutes. What do I do? In turn, because of these questions, I had a number of phone calls and emails, correspondence with the election office and the county solicitor before Election Day, trying to make sure I was disseminating information correctly to the voters, volunteers, and the campaign. One call turned heated when the registrar threatened to turn me over to the district attorney for posting a picture of a voter ballot harvesting a large bag of ballots at a Northampton County drop box. It was my opinion the registrar was more concerned we exposed it rather than the fact that it was happening. The most pertinent information I have to offer this committee was my conversations with the election office regarding curing the disqualified naked ballots, which they unlawfully pre-canvassed before Election Day. They actually told me on the phone early in October they felt them, they held them up to the light, they separated them out in different boxes. Reflecting back on these 3 weeks, in the experience, the major concerns regarding this election are equal protection. Were the Democrats and Republicans treated the same? Were they given the same information and opportunity to vote? Did they equally have an opportunity to cure their disqualified ballots? Not in my county. There was no ability to properly witness the canvass of the mail-in ballots or see the actual ballots. Were there signatures? The solicitor told me there is absolutely no law that allows us to see the counting or to see the ballots. To this day, we have no idea what or whose ballots were counted. Another one, very strange. There's a pattern of reactivated old voter rolls that kept reoccurring on the SURE system. The SURE system is our Pennsylvania voter system. Scores of people that had not voted since the 1990s, more than 22 years ago, were all now reactivated and receiving mail-in ballots. People that didn't vote for Obama or Hillary were all of a sudden receiving mail-in ballots, setting up the opportunity for fraud on a massive scale that would go undetected because voters who never intended to vote would not know. The SURE system is not so sure. We also found in Northampton County more than 1,500 votes where the mail-in ballot was received in the election office on a date before it was even mailed.
I will introduce to you now, Mr. President. You are connected.
Great networks, but I really appreciate being asked to speak. And I'm in the Oval Office right now, and it's very interesting to see what's going on. And this was an election that we won easily. We won it by a lot. A big energy official was on this morning on a important show and said there's no way Trump didn't win Pennsylvania because the energy industry was all for him. I saw, with my eyes what happened, and he told me horror stories, absolute horror stories. So this was very sad to say it. This election was rigged, and we can't let that happen. We can't let it happen for our country. And this election has to be turned around because we won Pennsylvania by a lot, and we won all of these swing states by a lot. Anybody watching television the night of the election was saying, wow, I was called by the biggest political people, congratulations, sir, on a big win. And all of a sudden, ballots were dumped all over the place, and a lot of horrible things happened. And everybody in that room, I want to thank all of the people that signed affidavits and all of the speakers. You fantastic people, you're great patriots. I want to thank the senators for being there, and it's so important. Day before Thanksgiving, it really represents somebody. Between the voter suppression and all of the horrible things that happened to poll watchers, I really appreciate it, and the country appreciates it, and we have to turn the election over because there's no doubt we have all the evidence, we have all the affidavits, we have everything. All we need is to have some judge listen to it properly without having a political opinion or having another kind of a problem, because we have everything. And by the way, the evidence is pouring in now as we speak.
My Northampton County chairperson, Lee Snow, did an excellent job explaining what was going on in Northampton County. One of the biggest things that bothered me more than anything else was people that went to vote and they were told they already voted. That happened. I must have heard it from 50 people in my district. So, they made them sign a provisional, and I called up and I says, you better make sure that those provisionals are counted. And some of the other things that were happening that most of the stuff that you said out there, it happened in every county. But when you didn't want to vote with your absentee and you went in, you're supposed to get a ballot, not a provisional. And there were people out there that got provisionals. But just a little information for all of you. The new machines, this new process, we didn't vote for it. That was something that was pushed by the governor. He mandated that all of the counties had to go and change their system because he wanted some type of, what we don't have is a form to see who voted or who voted. They want a certificate or something, a slip to see how you voted, who voted. And it's obvious that this system has not worked, and the people of Pennsylvania are not happy about it.
This was done because they knew this is the only way they could steal this election. And when he was ahead by those numbers on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, they panicked. I'll also tell you there's an expert witness who can testify that this pattern fits the pattern that Smartmatic used in 2 elections that they stole in South America. When the election was getting too far away, they called a halt in the voting count. Well, there was a halt called in 6 places, including in Pennsylvania. In one place, they made believe there was an overflowed water tank. It happened to be one little toilet bowl. They took a 2-hour halt, and in Michigan, they brought in 100,000 ballots through the back door and counted them with nobody observing them, except 3 people who happened to be remaining behind. That's evidence that's also in affidavits and could be presented to the Michigan legislature. Those people are willing to testify. And just one other thing, these people are very brave people. But there are probably another 50 who are not willing to testify, including probably what would have been one of our best witnesses, because he's been threatened with the loss of his job and his children being thrown out of their private school.